this is then a Stellenbosch team that Jaden Adams is leaving, but he leaves them having helped them qualify for the quarterfinals of the Confed. South African teams doing pretty well in Africa this season. But Chuck,
Yeah.
at what cost, right, with regards to a team like Stellies? Stellies have only managed one win. I have to say it's against Orlando Pirates. They've only managed one win in their last 6 domestic games, including the Colin Cup, which they were knocked out by Marumo in that one. And they find themselves 14 points off the top of the log after only 11 games. Previously, we've seen Marumo Gallants get to the semifinals of the Confed and be relegated. We've also seen Orlando Pirates, last time they went to the Champions League final, they finished in 6th place in that particular season. So there seems to be a payoff that if you do well on the continent, you are going to suffer locally. And my question around that, where Stellies are concerned and the progress they've been making locally, having won a cup competition, finishing 3rd, is it worth it?
I think it is, Jay. And when I look at, I know you detailed case studies and you showed us Pirates and what they did and Chiefs and all that stuff and what they did in Africa versus what they did in the domestic league. And I think all that being true, I still want to look at this as its own case, as its own individual case, because there's no Reyners who's been sold. There's no Van Rooyen who's been sold. We don't know about Basadine. Mujela is injured as well. So those are factors that I think played a role in where they are in the league table right now, because at the back end of the last season, they finished quite strong, right? And if they were to go into a second stint in Africa, whether it's Confed, whether it's Champions League, and then this happens again, then we can say that obviously if you have your eye on Africa, then your league form suffers. But going to the natural or the general analogy of the fact that if you keep your eyes on Africa, you do suffer. I think I'll take that gamble. I mean, obviously, you don't want it to happen like Gallants, where you go all the way to the final, but then you get relegated, because that's catastrophic, right? But if you're Stellies, that's what you play for. You play for harder games. You play for more, not necessarily in that particular way, but you play for more glory. You play for more titles. You play for more tougher fixtures. You play to test yourselves and become better and better, because the only way that Stellies will ever rub shoulders with even at this point, a super sport, Amazulu, and become a big name, so if they do better than them, and that's going to Africa, that's playing against big opposition and winning things, then you're like, okay, Stellies belongs in a higher bracket. So I think as a new team in the PSL, relatively, like they're 6 years old now, something like that, you want to do big things like that. So I think, Jay, it's worth it, one, because of financial returns. Number two, they don't seem to mind selling off their players. So the more experience and the more games that they play at a higher level, I'm sure you can demand more buck for that. So I think, Jay, the trade-off is quite harsh. You have to be able to manage that and not finish rock bottom and not be outside the top 8 places, because that's still more money for the next season in the MTN 8. But I think, all in all, that's what you play for as footballers. As much as we hear them complaining to play every 3 games, you want to be in the Champions League. You want to be in the Euros. You want to be in all these tough places. You want to be in the latter parts of the FA Cup. You want to play the Supercopa España. As much as you want to complain, that's the path to glory. And so these are teething problems if they're to be here more consistently. At some point, you'll do well in Africa, suffer locally. But when you have understood the task at hand and you know how to dot your I's and cross your T's, you want to do good at both parts of the race. You want to be where Sundowns are. Sundowns have figured it out. If they're doing it more consistently, that's winning the league and also being in CAF. So I think overall, my opinion is that it's good. It's a good trade-off. Just need to make sure that you don't go all the way down.
I think it depends who you are. I think it depends on the team. If you're going to get relegated, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It is absolutely not worth it. If you're gonna get to the semifinals, and even when you win that prize money, because unfortunately those players, last I checked, they didn't get a share of the money because it was not promised to them, because the team didn't go into the season thinking they make the semifinals of the Confed. But what we've also heard reported is that the trade-off financially is because of the travel and the stay and everything else that's involved logistically, you don't actually make all that much money. I think you start seeing the benefit financially when you get to like the semifinals, and when you mention the financial part of it, because that's a big thing, particularly here at home, and on the continent. So if Stellies do go to like the semifinals or finals or win it, then happy days. Because I think if you win the tournament, you get $2 million, if not $4 million, and that's a great big windfall, for any of the PSL teams. Sundowns who charter flights for their players and put them on a private jet to get from representing Bafana at that to come home to represent their club. That's different, right? They live in a different world. So Stellies being down where they are in the league, where I think this season Stellies will finish like 6th, 7th, or 8th, right? And make it to the semis or the finals, or hopefully win the Confed. But then you come back next season and you now know, how do we compete in the league, and we continue our ambitions in winning domestic cup competitions like we've already done, and we get back in a continental competition and do well there. And I think for the growth of the game in this country, we do need our teams to do well in the Champions League. You were talking to me about it off air in terms of, we have a different approach now and attitude to the Champions League because of what Sundowns have been able to have managed to do on the continent, consistently being there, being in the quarters, being in the semis, being mentioned as one of the teams that you look out for in terms of winning the whole thing. And now when Pirates come into the Champions League, it's not just, oh man, it's great that Pirates have finally made it into the group stages. Let's make it out of the group stages and let's go further in the competition. And there's that expectation not only from the fans but also from the teams themselves. And I think overall it's growth. So I think if you are, as I'm saying, a team that's gonna be like, maybe you make a fairy tale run to the Nedbank Cup final and then and in the Confed and you do like Emma Room and you go far but you get relegated, it's not worth it for those teams. But I think for teams that have greater ambitions, your Pirates, Sundowns, Chiefs, Stellenbosch, Cape Town City, Supersport previously, Kokune, who now unfortunately they got knocked out before they went into the group stages, but who are continuously doing well and are consistent in doing well. And you see in the ambition of the players that they're getting as well. You know, for those teams, I think it is worth a chuck, even if it means growing pains at the beginning.